welcome to GameSpot presents the HotSpot. It is Wednesday, March 14th. I'm Tom Ingrino. We are back on our normal schedule, thank God. Oh my God, thank God. Thank you everyone who tuned into the GDC podcasts. That was entertaining, but also a nightmare to record. But back to the normal one week a week podcast. A few things I want to go over. This week I'm going to try something new and do a HotSpot highlights. So if you are seeing this and you're like, what the hell, this is 10 minutes long, you're doing it wrong. The actual hour-long video will be up elsewhere, hopefully in a way that makes sense. Kevin, did you see anything cool at GDC?
I saw a couple things. All the panels I went to were music related.
Okay.
And I don't want to get too far into this because we're going to talk about Journey later. Easily the best panel I went to was done by Austin Wintory, who is the composer of Journey's soundtrack, as well as the composer of other soundtracks, most notably maybe Flow, another That Game Company game. And the greatest thing about this, is I left feeling so incredibly inspired and uplifted after I went to this, which is not something you can say about everything you go to at GDC. But I left this feeling really inspired because I thought, here's a guy who gets it. He talked about the whole point of the panel was music as storytelling, and how music tells a story, maybe just as important as the actual story or the actual narrative.
It's so weird. I was listening to Peter and the Wolf on the way to work this morning. Somebody had it on in the car. But that's another that's another thing that has music as storytelling.
Yeah, that's music as storytelling, but that's music, traditionally composers so I majored in violin and music composition. So, traditionally, classical music like that was kind of separated into two types, classical music that tells a very vivid story, and classical music that's just there as music, and so, but this is kind of a third kind of way of looking at things, because Journey's not, like Peter and the Wolf, or something like Beethoven's Sixth Symphony or something like that. These are things, which are very specifically this is a very specific thing translated into music. So you hear dun dun da 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 in Peter and the Wolf, and that's Peter, And so, everything is meant to be very symbolic of something that's a circumstance. Whereas in Journey, or what Austin is talking about, this is more of the emotional curve, rather than simply the music is supposed to tell you exactly what's happening. And that's, I think, a very key difference. He talked about this overall arc. So for example, and I don't want to get too spoilery into it, but the game begins with a lot of, lush kind of, but still electronic music with solo instruments. We're just electronic, buzz, not buzz, but kind of drone sort of music. And then it gradually grows until towards the end of the game, you have full orchestra. And within that, so there's this emotional arc that he was talking about. But then within that, you have sub-arcs that have to fit. And so, you might tell a very small musical story when, for example, you happen upon a certain site in Journey where there will be music cues there that don't exist if you don't visit that particular place. But it still has to fit. That small musical narrative arc has to fit within the larger arc. So obviously, if it's early in the game, you're not going to go suddenly full orchestra, because that wouldn't make sense within the larger arc.
This comment was interesting in light of something that David Jaffe said this week about he couldn't care less about the next generation. What did he say? So basically, the thing he said was, when you have each new generation brings about all sorts of A, technical challenges, B, bigger budgets. You have to spend more. You have to make all these compromises to get a game on a new platform. So it's there's a lot of, right now, kind of excitement for new platforms, the next Xbox, PS4, Wii U. But at the same time, it's totally going to set back the industry as far as creative development. Assassin's Creed 3, I don't know, I doubt it would be as creative as it is going to be, maybe, if it were on, next Xbox, because they would be so mired in getting that game onto the new technology that they couldn't. It seems like they would have a much harder time taking creative risks, because there would just be so many other things.
Didn't we see that happen with sports games in particular going into the current generation?
A lot of
EA is completely shameless with what they do with that. But at the same time, at the beginning of the next generation, we get BioShock and we get Mass Effect and we get Assassin's Creed. Now we get sequels to those games. But I mean, before we were getting brand new games, and BioShock is crazy, new, and different. And that was that was an early. Yeah. Usually, next gen brings in like, oh, I could do this now. I'm going to do this. Whereas later in development, it's just like, oh, I can just do this again and again and again because I already made the asset. So I don't think it staunches creativity at all. I mean, getting the GameCube up, you get Metroid and Pikmin.
Yeah,
those are crazy creative.
I think that to talk about this game in any top level terms is almost impossible, and does it a great disservice though, because what this game is really about is it's about using movement, environment, and using kind of the power of a single image or a sequence of images in order to elicit emotions that you're not used to having games, in doing it in a way that is not the straightforward kind of way you assume that entertainment elicits emotion, because it's not telling you a direct narrative story. It's not, there is no dialogue. There are no characters per se in this game. And the fact that it can do it by pure image, pure sound, and the pure feeling of movement is spectacular.
The first emotion that I really felt while playing this game was as a result of co-op. Co-op is kind of forced upon you. You have no option in that.
Someone appears, but you can choose to work together or not.
Right. So in the second level, the first time that person appears, there's you have to build these ribbon bridges to get atop this really high cliff. And so he and I were just running around, we figured out oh, you need to shout to activate the ribbon. And he's like, oh, okay, we're going to go over here. And we signal each other hey, I see something over here, come over here so you can do it too. But then as I once we built the bridge, and I'm not sure if this was just because he was somewhere else and then ran off, or what, but the bridge was built and I started walking up the bridge and I'm looking around for hey, where's my guy? We just did this together. And he wasn't there, and it's just I felt this huge feeling.
It was loss, right?
Yeah,
you felt loss,
and I felt it was a relationship that had gone bad.
Yeah,
I felt I was breaking up with someone.
What did I do wrong?
I get it.
Yeah,
and oh god, I'm gonna dominate again just for a second though. There's this whole sequence where you're sort of in this more underwater feeling place where it's very dark, and you encounter these giant creatures that have lights that they shine on you for the first time. And if it gets you, it'll snatch away most of your scarf, and you fall over and you have to get up again and recover. And I did, for the first time I saw this, I was with another player and we were coming along, and I escaped and the other player did not. And I watched this all happen.
Oh,
and
God.
I felt such sadness that this person that I was developing this wordless kind of camaraderie with, he was my friend. And I saw my friend completely disrupted, and it temporarily devastated me watching this soul and the thing is, you assign this innocent soul, and the reason you feel like you can say it is because this is how I kind of feel too, I'm stripped of most adult kind of obligations. It's very much this child. You're very much childlike to me in this game, and so you're friends just because you're there together, when you're in a playground with other children.
It's interesting what this brings out in the individual player.
Do you know what my friend Robert said to me after he finished the game? Because he was in tears when he, for a good portion of the final bits of that game. He said, because his mom died some years ago, and what he got out of kind of the final ascent in that game is, he said it felt like I was going back. It felt like I was going to see my mom. And that kind of says to you sort of the power. And this is not somebody that I would suggest is one of the most emotional people I know. And the fact that it has that kind of power to evoke in such simple terms important events of your own life, just by very nature of tapping into that small single emotion, kind of speaks to this game's power.
It really feels like the culmination of what we've seen so far as storytelling and all those other aspects merging into something. I haven't seen a game that is this cohesive before. Because I mean, on like the surface, I compare it to Mario 64's just amazing freedom of movement with Shadow of the Colossus's scale and storytelling without telling a story, just visual and like all that stuff. But it goes so much further than those games ever did, and it's just like it just feels like a game that any developer could play and learn from,
Right.
which is kind of rare, I guess, because it just feels like the Mass Effect guys and Jonathan Blow alike could play it and be like, oh, I never thought of this before.